In this video, we can see how we can write an equation of the form y equals a sine bx or y equals a cos bx from the graph. Okay, so what you need to understand is if you're trying to write an equation in the form y equals a sine bx or y equals a cos bx, there is no vertical shift, okay, vertical shift, which is d equals 0. That means midline for these graphs will always be y equals 0, okay, or x-axis. Okay, so there's no vertical shift. Also, there's no horizontal shift, okay, horizontal shift, which means the graph will invariably start either at the origin if it's the sine function. So sine will start at the origin and cosine will start at y-axis. Again, x equals 0, okay? Somewhere in the y-axis, right? And another thing to notice here is a sine function starts at the origin, okay, and the amplitude is how high it is from the midline. The midline is the x-axis here, and the amplitude is how low it can go from the midline also, and the period is the distance in that is covered in one cycle, right? From this origin to the end of one cycle, right? So remember, the sine function starts at the origin, whereas the cos function starts at the y-axis, not at the origin, and it has a different shape than sine function. It starts at the origin, and then it goes down and comes back to the same amplitude height. Okay, so the midline is still x-axis or y equals 0. The midline is still the x or y equals 0. And the period is from this point to this point. That's the distance. Okay, now this is the shape of the sine function and the cos function when your a is positive. When your a is positive. What happens if it's negative? If it's negative, it's reflected in the x-axis. So it'll be starting here and going downhill and then coming up and ending at the end of one period. Same with the cosine function. It starts in the negative y-axis and goes up and comes down to the same point. Okay, so keep them in mind, and we'll try to do this one question. So we're trying to write an equation of this for this graph, a trigonometric equation, either sine or cosine. Remember, d and c are 0 here. No vertical shift, no horizontal shift, which means the midline is 0. So this is the midline, right? Okay. All you need to do is to first determine if it's a cosine function or a sine function. Now remember, both the functions, since the phase shift is 0, start at y-axis. If it's sine, it starts at the origin. If it's cosine, it starts somewhere in the y-axis. So this is supposed to be a cosine because it starts here, right, on the y-axis at 2. So we are going to focus on the cosine function, not on the sine function. Okay, now all we need to do is to find the amplitude, which is A, and then the B, but from period. Okay, so you need to find the period and the amplitude. Okay, let's find the amplitude first. The amplitude is how high the graph is from the midline. This is my midline. So how low or how high the graph is from the midline. Now, we need to just take up one cycle. So I'm going to start, this is the starting point. So my one cycle would be up to here. Okay, I can ignore these parts, just one cycle. Okay, now the amplitude is 2, right? Amplitude is 2. Remember, it's a magnitude of A, so it's 2. It's not reflected in the x-axis, so it's a positive 2. What about my period? What about my period? The period, period is from the starting point to the completion of one cycle. This is the one cycle, is the period. So this distance is the period. So from 0 to 3 pi, from 0 to 3 pi. So 3 pi is the period. Now from this, I can find the value of b, okay? So the b is going to be 2 pi over period. Remember the formula period equals 2 pi over b. I'm just rearranging the same formula to get b. So now 2 pi over period is 3 pi. So the pi and pi cancel out. So answer is 2/3. So now I know A is 2 and B is 2/3, and the function is cosine. So I can write the function y equals A cos bx can be written as y equals 2 cos 2/3 of x. Let's do one more question on this. Now, I'm trying to find the equation of this line as y equals a sine x, sine bx, or y equals a cos bx. Okay, and I know that because of the question, I know there's no vertical shift and there's no horizontal shift, which is phase shift. So my midline is invariably the x-axis. All I need to do is to determine if it's a sine or cosine before I begin to work on this. So since the function starts at origin, it's sine function. If the graph starts somewhere in the y-axis, it's going to be a cosine function. So let me pick up this, and let me determine one complete cycle. So this goes down like this. This is the minimum, and then goes to the maximum and come back to the same point. So my distance is 14 pi over 3. That's going to be my period. Okay, 14 pi over 3. And my amplitude is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So my amplitude is going to be 4. And remember, this is reflected in the x-axis. So just check with this. If it's reflected in the x-axis, it's going to be, A is going to be negative. Okay. So even though the amplitude says 4, my amplitude is going to be negative 4. What's my period? The period is going to be 14 pi over 3. From this, I'm going to find B using the formula 2 pi over 14 pi over 3. So how do I simplify this? I cancel out the pi's, okay, and also simplify 2 and 14, which is 1 over 7. So I get 1 over 7 over 3. Now, what I can do is 1 times 3 over 7. I can do that. I can put the reciprocal of the denominator and multiply with the numerator. So 1 times 3 is 3. So B equals 3 over 7. A we've already determined, which is negative 4. So this is a sine function, right? So y equals negative 4 sine b is 3 over 7, so I can write 3x over 7. X is the variable, right? So that's how you write the equation of these trigonometric functions from the graph.